Hey guys, what's going on? It's Spunkavite here on behalf of MMOBomb.com, and welcome back to the Free to Play podcast. This show still is happening? I guess so. We're on episode 111. I think that's the last time it's going to happen for another 111 episodes, I suppose. Man, that's a while from now. It's September 8th, 2014, and besides just me on this podcast, we have the ever-present, dashing, dazzling, debonair that is Jason Winter. How are you doing, Jason?
Wow, so that was 4 adjectives used to describe me. You said you had a list of 100, so we've only got you gotta space them out a little more, man.
Well, you're alert and alluring.
Oh my God, that's okay. Stop. You only got 94 left.
We got so many. I could just go through. This list is already 100, and then I think there's an extra 26 below here. So we've got plenty of ones to go through over the next however many episodes. Even if I did 5 at a time, Jason, that's still 20 episodes worth of positive words to describe you without using the word horse.
Horse?
Or a stallion.
Stallion. That's okay. That's
oh, come on. Sure. Horse is okay. Horse is a little bit. You're not a horse. You're a stallion.
Maybe
Jason.
A horse's ass, but anyway.
Yeah. Oh, you're a charming horse. That's what. That charming stallion. Oh. Okay. What were you? Oh, yeah. Positive words. Positive thinking, Jason. Positively speaking, how was your weekend?
My weekend was good because my football team won by a lot.
What was your football team?
The Vikings.
The Vikings won, so they pillaged another place.
They pillaged St. Louis. Yes, they took the arch and they took it back.
They pillaged St. Louis.
Yes.
Poor St. Louis. He's just a saint.
They took the arch right up the Mississippi River. Took it all the way back to Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Trivia fact: I am descended from St. Louis. But anyway.
Wow, what a traitor!
Yeah.
Totally going against. It's all right. I'm descended from Oklahoma, and I can't think of anything good to say Oklahoma, so it's even there. It's even.
No, I meant I'm descended from the actual St. Louis, the actual person.
Oh, the actual. I thought you were saying that your family line is descended from St. Louis.
No.
I didn't know that. Well, look at you. Are you like holy or something, Jason?
Oh, I'm also descended from some Vikings, so it actually kind of works out. Both.
You're a holy Viking.
Yep.
Man, I can only imagine what that would have been like on the battlefield. Jason, it's been a while, but we're back.
Yes.
It is. We're gripping this by the reins. We're pulling this in. I don't know why I'm on this like horse/stallion thing about reins and controlling and whatever. But we're back. We've got a lot of great stuff. We had, of course, PAX and Gamescom that we were gone at. Specifically, I was gone at. And
then I was off at SOE Live.
Yeah, you were off at SOE Live. We all were just so busy with all these meetings. I all decided to cram them in August. So August was sort of a break for the free to play podcast. Look, I couldn't even say the words.
It's so long you forgot how to talk.
Exactly. Oh my God, can you believe that? If it's only been a month and how much I've forgotten already. We've got a great episode, of course. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the recent sort of big news that's come out of the industry regarding free-to-play. A lot of changes, if you will, between some of the games that we're familiar with and some that are on the horizon. And then we kind of discuss a little bit about foreign MMOs, in particular, whether or not they really can just come over here to the West fast enough. That seems to be a problem with those games currently. And with everything that we've been seeing from the Western side of things and how fast games are starting to come up in the free-to-play market, that could be posing some sort of major issues for Eastern developers wanting to crack the Western market. So we've got a great set of news, Jason. I know you're excited. Are you wearing pants?
I am. Actually.
It is Monday. I guess it'll be 5 o'clock there, so I hope you would be wearing pants by this point.
That's never a guarantee.
Never guaranteed. Not when you work from home. But why don't we just jump right in and get right into the first news bit? All right. So, Jason, both you and I have now finally played SOE's H1Z1. Their survival MMO FPS, or I guess it's TPS and FPS, depending on which way you play it. You played it at SOE Live. I played it at PAX Prime, which I feel we played it very late when it comes to like gaming journalism. Like it seems like everybody else has played it up to this point, but for some reason we just didn't get around to it.
It was mostly. I mean, a lot of people like outside seem to be doing it. Were like different streamers that they teamed up with. It's not like didn't seem like a whole lot of the media sites were getting a whole lot of playtime on it.
Yeah, they get like a little bit here or there, but overall a lot of it's been just through the stream and the transparent interactions between SOE and sort of like Twitch community and just their communities in general. So I definitely would agree with you there. But we actually heard some changes. Even despite that, what players have got a hold of, they've been able to influence SOE sort of decision making with some of the upcoming mechanics for H1Z1. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about H1Z1 overall, your impressions of it, and then your impressions of these changes. So for those of you guys who are familiar with games like H1Z1, so you've got Unturned, you've got DayZ, 7 Days to Die, Rust, all these different sort of survival shooter slash just adventure games, if you will. They all seem to have a basic formula where you start off with either nothing or close to nothing. I think in Rust you start off with a rock. It's pretty much as basic as you can
Rust
get.
It's really just a rock and you're naked. At least other games usually get clothes.
At least you haven't been stripped naked in H1Z1. You've got something. You got the clothes on your back. But they decided to remove the axe from H1Z1, which you started initially in the builds currently. It's not in early access yet, but it will be. And previous to that, you started with an axe, and you could use that axe to defend yourself against zombies and to chop down trees. And they took that out because they decided that that would actually direct players more towards the scavenging and survival factor early on, which is a big thing they wanted people to focus on, instead of, I guess, just using the hatchet to go on a murdering spree or something. I mean, it's already the apocalypse. What else, what else can you do with the hatchet at that point besides chop things down and kill people? I guess that's its main purposes.
Well, chop down trees, too.
Yes.
And I think that's a part of it, too. And I think because... I don't know that it made the. I wouldn't say it made the game easy. I mean, certainly it's it was still challenging when I played it, and I started out with the axe. But being able to jump right in, having a weapon right off makes you feel a lot better than like maybe it should. But it's just the whole scavenging kind of. I've been dropped into the wasteland and I've got nothing sort of thing. I agree that it probably was a good thing to take out the axe.
And that's the thing. That's what I wanted to sort of discuss. Like from a baseline. Gameplay level, yes, it directs the focus more towards scavenging. It makes you more focused on those early game progression of crafting and finding the crafting materials and getting the axe so you can chop down trees, so using crafting materials. Because I believe you use the logs from trees to make like arrows for a bow that you can craft as well. So from the gameplay, yes, but is that really fun? Is it fun to every time you die? Because in these kind of games, you die a lot when you're trying to figure things out. Is it fun to always have to go and find that axe again? Go and do that. Or is it much better of an experience to just be like, okay, I have this axe no matter what to start with. I can go out now and begin my crafting and begin rebuilding my society without having to first go and refine those tools.
No, I think it's fine to have it without. I think, first of all, it's not like you're completely defenseless. You still have your fists at the very least, so you can always, use those. I think what they'll have to do is maybe up the frequency of weapon drops and that sort of thing, because I had a hard time finding much of anything, whether it was gun or hand weapon or something like that. So if you can have at least a little more ability to find, whether it's like a knife or a baseball bat or something like that, which they'll probably do now because they know you're not going to start off with a weapon, so you have at least a little something early on to defend yourself with. And I don't know, maybe there's going to be other ways for you to get wood other than just chopping down trees. Maybe there'll be like a fireplace in some places where you can get some chunks of wood, so you don't necessarily need an axe all the time.
I want to be able to like find like chairs and just break them down. Just be snapping the legs off of chairs and be like, okay, I can use this for something.
That would make some sense too. Maybe that's something else they could put in. But yeah, I mean, and it definitely doesn't need it, I think, to start off with. I think that's what people are used to. Like you say, in a lot of games, you just start off with a rock in Rust, or you have nothing in DayZ and stuff like that. So having to go around and having to always be a slightly different experience. When I started with an axe every time, I was like, okay, I've got the axe. I'm going to go around, I'm going to chop trees. Every time it's like I'm starting with the axe, going to chop trees, and chop up a zombie, whatever. If I can go and find something different, maybe it'll be a knife, maybe even a gun or something, it'll be a different start every time. I won't have that same kind of sameness feeling every time I make a new character.
That makes a good point. I would argue that maybe the axe was just too crucial of an item to start players with because it had dual purpose. You could kill things with it as well as craft with it by chopping down trees, essentially. So maybe just starting a player off, because, I mean, Jason, if you look around your house right now, like, chances are you got something that you could use as a weapon. A knife, there's something there. And so realistically speaking, if you're in the apocalypse, even if you have bare minimum supplies, you should have something other than your fists to like go about, you know, punching things or killing things initially. And while that item may not be something that you could maybe use to chop down trees or even craft any other type of item, it is some sort of rudimentary defense outside of just what you have in your hands.
Dude, I live in Texas. I keep an assault rifle right next to my computer all the time.
I don't even know if you're joking because it's Texas. So
yeah, I know.
yeah, you could be very well like that could be the truth. You know, I would believe you. But yeah, I mean, this is the sort of thing where I'm like, even if they took away the axe, I would like to see something outside of just having your fists as like, because they mentioned that they improved the combo nature of fist attacks, so you could like connect them better and do more damage and sort of like stagger enemies, whether they be zombies or other players. But it just kind of seems like naturally you would have at least like a pocket knife or something along with you to add to a little bit of the damaging factor. So that's something that I would like them to take like another look at there. They also made some tweaks to how things spawned. I know, Jason, you were talking about trying to find a weapon to defend yourself. They made it so that all weapons spawn outside of crates and whatnot, so they're always in visible locations. And then they made it where crafting supplies, generally speaking, spawns inside of things like closets or, you know, cabinets or whatever else they use to contain those things. What do you think about that sort of clear black and white spawn distinction?
Yeah, I was a little kind of annoyed by that, having to go through drawers to find everything. Like, there's nothing just lying around in the world for me to grab, which, again, is something that you're used to in a game like DayZ, or there's just a gun lying around. So I definitely like that. I wish there would be a little variety. I wish it wouldn't be just straight up black and white. It's always this, or, you know, crafting always in containers, weapons always sitting out. I mean, you should be able to make it so that, you know, because sometimes stuff is just laying around, you know, might be crafting materials. Like I said, like the logs in the fireplace or whatever, might just be sitting around there. And you might expect to see some weapons, like maybe a pistol in a drawer or a knife or in the kitchen drawer or something like that. So I like it as long as it's sensible. Like, again, probably don't have the assault rifle in the TV stand, you know, something like that. So as long as it's sensible, I'd like for there to be at least some, you know, a little bit of mix between those two places for loot.
I mean, if you think about it, did everybody just like rush to get their weapons out and then rush to leave them in wherever they were lying around? Because you think about, like, they've been placed in that location. Someone literally got the pistol out, set it on top of a drawer, and then forgot about it. Like, there's going to be some things that are stored away just because people forget about them or they have to leave. You know, to add to that, you know, to really break that up a little bit really would add to the immersion. And I would think it would do so without creating necessarily these issues that they're worrying about where the screen's too cluttered and players can't find, like, early, you know, weapons. I think they can have it slightly, you know, more towards one thing. Okay, where most weapons are outside, like 70%, but like 30%, you know, some of the other weapons are scattered about or found within drawers. Just doing that, I think, would add a lot to the immersion factor, in my opinion. But all right, we'll have to see. It's supposedly going to go in early access soonish.
God, I'm not listening to anything they say about when it's going until they actually...
I know. I talked to them at PAX Prime. They weren't given any kind of information regarding that at all whatsoever. And I have to do. I mean, I would say. Go ahead.
I have a little light confirmation, at least like by the end of the year.
Okay.
Like, I'm somewhat optimistic that I've heard that. So.
I think they also said that EverQuest Next would be this year too, but you know.
That was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. Yeah. So I mean, even so, I think what they have in the game so far, it easily is the amount of content that you would find in a game like maybe Rust or any of the other early access titles of the same sort of genre. There's already a pretty good amount in there. A lot of stuff is obviously alpha at the very, you know, at the most, and some of it looks even pre-alpha. But it's coming along. It's definitely coming along. Just needs however much time they need to work with it.
Already less buggy than DayZ.
Already. Yes, I haven't played DayZ in a while, so I heard that there's like some focuses and changes, and I think they're even going to a new engine or something like that. But this is certainly already looking like it's pacing the same as DayZ in terms of content creation and how fast they're moving forward in some areas. All right, moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about Riot and League of Legends. I know this is something League of Legends is talked about all the time, MOBA's talked about all the time. But this is a little different in that we're talking about the idea of revamping and redoing League of Legends' entire lore. Now, Jason, I know you're not a League fan, but practically everybody knows the rudimentary story of League of Legends. Do you know the story? what it is right
There's
now?
summoners, and there's the field of battle, and you summon your champions, and they fight and stuff.
That is a Ivy League scholar essay right there of the league lore. That's
I mean,
perfect.
I've read the like lore descriptions of a lot of them and watched some videos on them and so on. So I know there are all the kingdoms and different stuff and different battles going on and whatever. But it's just not something I paid that much attention to. It's
Yeah.
like you said, I'm not that into it.
I mean, I think the lore of League is like sort of the lore of like Warcraft. Even if you don't pay attention to World of Warcraft, but you're in the gaming sort of like environment, you pick up things here and there. And the
But
same,
that's the difference. Like when you play World of Warcraft, you are in that world. You're going to pick up that, hey, here's Thrall, and he's an important guy standing around here. Whereas there's nothing when you play League of Legends that really makes one character seem like he's this more important than someone else or something like that, I guess.
yeah, there's a clear disconnect, and I think that's something that Riot sort of realized because they're revamping the entirety of League's lore. Like they're taking it in its entirety. The whole like champions are brought into the field of justice, which is where they go and they battle with the players and what have you, and the players as the summoners. That whole system is changing because they basically said in a blog post that it felt too restricting and too, I don't know, almost like formulaic, I guess you could say, in the sense that they always had to come up with a reason why these champions had to go into the league, had to join the league. And then because they were being controlled while in the league by these summoners, it really made them one-dimensional because they just were basically puppets at that point, if you will. So they're wanting to revamp the lore, use some of the old lore as inspiration for the new lore. So a lot of the sort of characteristics of some of the characters and some of their backstories will stay the same. And Runeterra itself, which is the entire world within League, will also remain similar in the sense that, you have like the different regions and the types of people and what have you. But it does look like they're aiming to completely revamp the main part of the lore in hopes to expand the mediums by which it's sort of shown off, if you will. Which really gives me a lot of hope as an old League fan for, Riot actually looking to expand League into other mediums, whether it be like television shows like a comic, or not a comic, but a cartoon. A comic, yeah,
Comics,
they did comics already.
Oh, they have comics? All right.
Oh, I mean, they had like a comic that they did through, I forget what was it.
Penny Arcade.
The Penny Arcade, and then they had the one that was through the actual client itself. So they've had a couple of different representations of that. But I also was thinking like cartoon, of course, it makes sense. But then there's possibly the advantages of things like other game genres as well. An MMO, that's something that could definitely happen. I mean, if you want to think about it, they have all this area for lore, and then if you trace it back to like what Blizzard did with Warcraft, they took the Warcraft lore and spun it into World of Warcraft. So I definitely think there's like that player base for that. But how do you feel about them even deciding to change the lore just in general? Do you think once... I mean, League of Legends has been around for like 4 or 5 years at this point. Is that too long to decide to change it?
No, not at all. I think you do what you have to, especially like I said. I mean, granted, reading the comments on the article that they posted, a lot of people were upset about this. But like I said, I just have a hard time thinking that a lot of people care more than just the basic kind of, you have a general notion of who your character is, and you read the description, you're like, oh, okay, that dude sounds cool, I'm going to play him or her or whatever. And I just don't know that a whole lot of people care much beyond that. Obviously, it's probably that same kind of split like you see like in an MMO, where you got your players, your raiders, and your hardcore guys, and you get your role players doing their other thing. And the people who are really into the lore are probably more like that role player contingent, but they're probably a really small contingent. Most people are just like, I just want to play, get my loot, get my wins, whatever. Care a little bit about how fancy my character looks and what so on, but not to the point where I'm fully invested in the different wars going on between the various kingdoms, whatever, blah blah. Mm-hmm. And I agree though that I think that they have some other end game in mind. That they're not just doing this because, hey, we feel like rewriting it for the heck of it because we want to make it sound better. I think you don't expend this kind of energy and interest unless you're actually planning to make money off it. To be simple, I agree that they're working on some other project or have something else in mind. Whether a video MMO strikes me as a little iffy, just because how would you do it, and well, because people identify with the different champions.
Mm-hmm.
But how would you do that in MMO? We can't all be Ashe or all be Morgana or whatever. MMO, you tend to make your own character. So, I mean, I guess you could make it that they're just NPCs that you talk to and do stuff with, but that would seem, I don't know, that might seem a little less interesting, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you could sort of argue that the same thing was with, Warcraft. When you played Warcraft 3, you had, like, these central hero characters that made up part of your army. And, you played as them. You had control over them. But now, you compare that to, say, League of Legends, there's a way more champions. So having a role for all these champions is definitely a big undertaking, because that's a lot of lore. That's a lot of different individual characters to have spread out through a world like Runeterra, even if you are, thinking about it from an MMO perspective. That's a lot of people to sort of try to cram into this universe and have visible in different areas.
Right.
But they do have that ability, or that leisure, essentially, in the sense that they made certain that they said the game, League of Legends, and the lore don't have to follow the same path. Like, the two can be separate in their own areas. They can have areas where they cross over in certain ways, but overall they can remain separate and, without having to have one influence the other, basically. You don't have to have the gameplay influence the lore, and you don't have the lore influence the gameplay. They can be entirely separate from that. And I can understand how people would have issues with that. I can understand that, people want to feel like there's this sort of contingency where everything sort of, or congruency, everything stays the same, from shot to shot, or from aspect of the lore to other aspect, but at the same time, maybe the lore that they come up with is better. So it just makes more sense, and the whole, I don't know, narrative of it all just kind of feels more League, if you will. I mean,
I think it helps them, whatever they're going to come up with is going to help them to keep the game, to expand it. Because like they said, they're having trouble figuring out how to get people, or how to convince people that champions belong in the league, and they have reasons for signing up. So they've been doing some of the other videos they talked about, like the video for Braum I watched a while back. He's this awesome lumberjack dude who goes around and saves people and so on. That's the sort of thing that doesn't necessarily have an impact or has an influence on how he participates in the league, but it's good to build up his character and give you more of an idea of who he is and of the world that he lives in and how that impacts everything. And if you can do that, have it be able to give that kind of story for every character, that will help you make it a more interesting game overall.
Yeah, and I can't help but think about Strife for a second from S2 Games, because they actually had a single-player experience that they implemented into the open beta, whereby players could play through the lore, the backstory lore of one of the characters, and they mentioned that they wanted to do that for a lot of the different characters, so everybody can kind of have an idea of where these guys come from, and not just, hey, these are the characters here with their abilities and whatnot. And so I can definitely see that would be like one of the more obvious choice that Riot could do, is using the models or using the same characters or what have you to build these set pieces, if you will, where you can kind of flesh out and explore these other backstories and these other sort of instances of conflict or strife between the members of League of Legends without it having to have a direct sort of correlation with the actual league itself and the whole battling. I'm just sort of wondering if players will feel a little bit insulted if they're no longer summoners. Because Riot's always addressed players as summoners, and if they say that, well, summoners are just puppets, summoners are just controlling these champions like puppets, and we want to sort of break that so that they have more individual personality. Well, then, are the players still summoners? Are they still controlling these? Like, how does that dynamic work anymore? It kind of devalues them as players in some ways, it seems.
I think of like Magic the Gathering, how the story behind Magic the Gathering is that you're a wizard. You're a very powerful wizard, and you are summoning creatures and doing spells and whatever to attack the other guys. That's something they never really capitalized on. Wizards of the Coast did. They never really made that a big deal. Later on, you kind of have the planeswalkers, and I think that's almost more like where that notion is shifted towards. But and you're right. The fact that Wizards of the Coast never really went all out to call people wizards or whatever, as they're call Magic players wizards, whereas League of Legends does call them summoners. But I think it's not something that is so completely tied to the game that it has to be there. I think it's just kind of it's an abstraction that we're all kind of aware of. But I think if it just doesn't make sense anymore, I think you just got to let it go.
Yeah, and if we know anything, people on the internet may have a hard time letting things go.
Letting things go, yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Especially
we're just
when you have
talking about
like
SOE, people still haven't forgiven them for Star Wars Galaxies.
right? And so changing, that's what I'm saying, like even if fundamentally it makes sense, changing something so core to, I mean, there's people who cosplay over this stuff. They cosplay because they like the story.
Well, but they cosplay as a champion. Actually, I cosplay as a summoner all the time. I cosplay as myself. There you go.
I have seen people cosplay as summoners before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's very rare because it's boring. It's boring to cosplay. It's boring to cosplay as a summoner versus a champion, obviously.
Sure.
You know, because of the whole dynamic. But yeah, I mean, they that's right. They do cosplay as the characters themselves. But I think it's also in part due to the fact that the lore that is established for those characters, even if that lore is fundamentally flawed in its overall design. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays out. And I guess we'll be talking about it more once there's other lore to be had and to sort of discuss.
And find out what their actual like long-term plans are.
Yeah. My bet has always been on either single player level experiences, which they build and have people move through and what have you, or an entirely new genre altogether. Like that's my bet for this. I mean, we can see like the cartoon be an obvious choice. I mean, they've already starting to do the CGIs and what have you, but I think they're still looking at what games can we also build that will sort of complement League of Legends, but not necessarily compete with it. So I don't know, card game, that could be a thing.
Oh yeah, League of Hearthstone or whatever.
It could be. They did make it. Remember a while ago they did like have it never came out, but like the files.
Yeah, they talked about that, didn't they? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they said that it was just like one of their prototypes. They made a card game, so they could redo that and have a new thing to come out of that. But I really hope they would build an MMO, because to me Runeterra was always a pretty interesting location, like in terms of someone who actually did look at the lore a little bit for League, but they never explored it quite as much as I would have hoped. So hopefully they're able to do that in the future. Switching gears a little bit, Jason, we're going to fly all the way east and talk a little bit about some foreign games, in particular foreign MMOs like Phantasy Star Online 2, which was recently confirmed to still be coming to the West, but still be delayed.
It hasn't been canceled. We swear.
It hasn't been canceled.
We can't tell you anything about it, but we promise.
They're like, oh yeah, it's still coming, but it's still delayed. So might as well have not said anything at that point. I don't know. Sega and a lot of companies, it seems, that are in the Eastern market have this notion about bringing over these really popular games from the East. You know, and that's how we got things like Blade and Soul coming to the West, Phantasy Star Online 2 coming to the West, Black Desert coming to the West. But the problem I'm seeing nowadays is that the time that they need to really capitalize on the game's potential success is becoming less and less and less, in the sense that since there's more, it feels like more competition on the MMO front, on the free-to-play MMO front from Western developers now, Eastern developers can't get by with porting over an MMO that's already 2 years old or 3 years old or 4 years old to the Western market, because free-to-play players have more to choose from, it seems now, and increasingly every year seem to have more to choose from, at least from the Western market. So Phantasy Star Online 2, it's been delayed now. It was supposedly supposed to come out in 2013. It was announced that it was going to come to North America in 2012. It's now 2014. Still no sign of it. No sign of Blade and Soul. We're supposedly going to get Black Desert next year, 2015, just for the closed beta. We don't know when open beta is supposed to start for that. So at the same time, these games are competing against the likes of Landmark, H1Z1, PlanetSide 2, EverQuest Next, Skyforge, which isn't completely Western. It is somewhat Russian developed, but it's being developed tandemly with Obsidian, which is Western based. And so with all of this, I'm just really pressed to see, you know, are we safe to assume that Eastern MMOs will find it more difficult in the near future and thus less likely to compete for exposure?
I think they've always had it difficult to begin with. I think this is just one more hurdle that you're coming up against. I mean, they always had issues, you know, even in the past, just because of Well, in part, all right. My magnum opus here, or thesis or whatever, on the issues that the Western or that the Asian games have been having for a while, is that back in the day, going back like way back to the 80s, 90s, early 90s, whatever, that was where you got like your RPGs. They were all the Final Fantasies and Dragon Warriors and whatever. That was all there was. And then, of course, a lot of companies sprang up. A lot of companies in the West and U.S., Europe, and whatever started making their own games. You have your Elder Scrolls games, your Neverwinter Nights, whatever. And now there was competition with those other grand RPGs, and those Asian RPGs were different because they were just a completely different mindset and culture that they came from. So yeah, they did have the additional competition of that, and going on through to MMOs, you have that same issue where not a long time ago there weren't as many MMOs coming out. Like you said, not as many free to play, especially. So yeah, when you got a free to play game, it was almost always going to be an Asian game. Maple Story or something like that.
Flith. I mean, I can name a bunch of them.
Flith, yeah, sure. All those kind of games. But now that there are a lot more Western produced, MMOs, free to play MMOs, you're right. If you want to play an MMO for free or get into it for free at least, you have a ton more options and can go with something that was made by people, from your home country or that speak your language originally, that didn't have to wait. I mean, we do still have to wait seemingly forever for MMOs to come out, but at least we don't see other people playing them for 2 years, like you say, or hear about that going on, and hear about all the issues that the game goes through. Because an MMO that's been out in Japan or Korea for 2 years, a lot of people are going to follow that and go, oh well, then they screwed up this part of it and they screwed up that part of it. Are they going to fix that before they import it over here? Or those guys are playing expansions that have all this cool stuff. Are we going to get that stuff when it comes over? Or do we have to still wait for that? You're right. It does make for a really difficult experience and make it a lot tougher probably than it would have been a few years ago. But they always would have had some issue just because of the cultural issues, at least.
Yeah, and I think there is some actual good design decisions that come out of Eastern MMOs. I think we see a lot of sort of ambitious thinking. I mean, you can look at something like Black Desert and see wow, those developers were really ambitious when they designed the aesthetics of it. A lot of the systems in there look like they try to be ambitious, but then there's also parts of it that have the telltale sign of Korean influence, which is
ArcheAge is almost coming out, and there's a lot of great things about that. But man, a lot of things I look at that I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah, and when we look at ArcheAge is probably one of the last sort of advertised MMORPGs that's AAA in the sense that it's tab target. This is a game which came out in Korea 2 years ago, so it's been in development for even longer. It came out 2 years ago in Korea. Now it's finally coming out here in the Western market. And it's tab target, but yet it has a lot of other sort of unique features to it with the naval combat, and the trade routes and all these other sort of things that kind of make up for the fact that the combat is just tab target, in that respect. But still, it's coming up against, it's coming into release right at this sort of best possible time in between when Black Desert comes out, which is another really popular Eastern MMO, when that comes to the West. And then also things like Landmark, H1Z1, EverQuest Next, and Skyforge. Those games have yet to actually manifest in a large way yet as well. So it kind of seems like optimal for ArcheAge to come up at this time.
And it's got that kind of sandbox feel to it that not a whole lot of games have.
Exactly. And so there are things that go for Korean MMOs, but the whole translation time to get them here, on top of the, just normal development periods for MMOs, makes them, it's really up a hill, essentially. And especially now that we have SOE pumping a serious amount of cash into some of the more quote-unquote forward-thinking MMOs out there. It makes it even more difficult for those Eastern MMOs to stand out. And generally speaking, the ones that are worth waiting for take a long time to get here, and the ones that aren't so much worth waiting for get here super quick.
Snail games, excuse me.
Sorry.
I didn't mean to say Age.
Yeah.
Black Gold, sorry.
But even so, with things like Phantasy Star Online 2, this is a game that I played the Japanese version for, which I believe you can still play, maybe, unless they completely did that IP block. But this is a game that I played well, a while ago. You can go watch a video of it on MMOBomb, and it was fun to play. I felt like it would be a good addition to the free-to-play market now, but now that was 2 years ago. Since then, we're starting to see a lot of other good offerings come up from Western developers, and it really just sort of the hype that comes along with the fact or the knowledge that an Eastern game that's popular is coming to the West is not, generally speaking, enough to carry it through that translation process, it seems, nowadays at least, with more and more sort of saturation in the market.
Yeah, and it's like you talk about, too, with the hype. I mean, like I said, some games we hear about, Western games that we have 2-3 years where we're hearing updates and this and that about it, and this is just, it's like that same thing, only more almost, if you really are paying attention, if you're really looking at a lot of this stuff. Because you got the build-up to when it was coming out in Asia, and then the build-up for a while before it comes out here. Like, I was following ArcheAge back in, 2011, when my magazine, we did an interview with Jake Song. And that was when I first learned about it, and I've been kind of interested in it ever since. And now it's like, oh, it's almost finally here, and it seems like it's been forever that I've been hearing about it. So yeah, it's the wait is just compounded.
Do you think that, given that we're sort of globalizing now with free-to-play MMORPGs and the ones that sort of work, across different nations and areas, do you think we're going to see a lot more simultaneous development if the larger studios can do it, basically developing the Korean and the sort of North American versions at the same time? We're kind of seeing that with, like, say, Skyforge, where the Russian version of that is being developed simultaneously as the English version, having two separate groups on that.
I have to imagine that it's just not that easy, and it's just something, especially because it probably then, making MMOs is a big risk financially, and that's probably like doubling the risk. To release in North America and spend, whatever, $30 million or whatever you have to on your MMO. And then that doesn't cost the same amount, I'm sure, to release it in another country because you've already got your basic engine and graphics and whatever. But then that's another whole bunch of money and whatever you have to spend to release it somewhere else, not to mention finding your partner and all the other issues that go with that. It's probably just a really difficult and time-consuming thing to do. You have the couple of years that it took, like you said, for various games, ArcheAge and Black Desert and whatever. I look at Guild Wars 2, which just launched in China like a few months ago. So that was a year and a half after their launch. I imagine
a year and a half isn't bad. I mean,
that's
not really bad that considering. And if talking about Black Desert just quickly, that's probably the fastest, really big budget Eastern MMO that I can think of that's making a release relatively quickly in North American audiences. Like, it's going to be an open beta here by the end of 2014, and then it's going to go into closed beta for North America in 2015. I mean, that's roughly about a year in between, considering by the time you figure Black Desert goes into open beta in North America, it'll be maybe end of 2015, early 2016. That's not that bad for a year turnaround time. So it definitely seems like, but that's DOM we're talking about, which is the largest potential media conglomerate there in Korea, essentially. So they definitely have the money and the time, the resources behind it to pull that off.
And especially when we've seen how these games tend to not do so well a lot of times in the other regions. I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot of Korean games that have really gotten a foothold here in North America. So I can understand why they wouldn't be anxious to do that worldwide release and throw all that money and everything into it.
They definitely have their niche communities that are pretty like.
Oh yeah, they do, yeah. But
I can definitely tell you that I've stumbled upon quite a number of anime MMORPG community groups which flock to every single one of them. Lucent Heart and Dragon's Nest and Rusty Hearts, all those games definitely have a pretty solid group of people who are interested in them.
If only Xanax was here to speak up for his peeps.
I know, he would be totally the person here to talk about that. Can't believe he wasn't able to make it today. But all right, so I'd like to hear what you guys think, where you think the free-to-play MMO market is headed in the coming years, particularly the whole interaction between Western developers and Eastern developers. Do you guys think we're going to see Eastern games develop simultaneously a little bit more with the Western market? Do you think sort of the Western market's going to take over in terms of the free-to-play MMO and sort of like establish itself as the dominant free-to-play MMO, I guess, home space, if you will? Let us know in the comments. I'm curious to know. All right, so moving on to the A-bombs. Day bombs. Da bomb, A bombs. I'm gonna give an A bomb, Jason. All right, okay. I'm gonna lay it down. I'm gonna give an A bomb to S2 Games, specifically S2 Games Management. I shouldn't say just S2 Games. Those guys are fine. S2 Games Management. I have a beef with you guys. I saw them. I met a lot of the guys there at PAX. Good guys. But it seems as though post-PAX, coming back from that, S2 pretty much laid off 40% of its staff due to what it calls a byproduct of mismanagement prior to open beta. So
they actually said it was because of mismanagement?
Yeah, they actually said it was because of mismanagement. They didn't say
restructuring to streamline our operations. Anyway.
No.
They actually said mismanagement. Wow.
They said it wasn't caused by poor numbers from Strife's recent open beta launch or falling player numbers, but due to the byproduct of mismanagement prior to open beta, which saw the open beta team expand to accommodate roughly 80 members. And in comparison, they said that something like Heroes of New Earth only had about 20 members when it launched in open beta. So it had 60 more members, and it was too much of a growth. They said it was more applicable to the size of a team needed for a game that has already established itself, not necessarily a game that just started its open beta. So they felt like they had to cut it from 80 members down to about 50, which is what it is now. That's a 40% decrease. That's pretty significant. Like, I would say that's pretty hefty group size, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, how do you figure out that you thought you needed 80, but you only need 50?
And to me, though, what seems like the sort of most pressing thing that irks me is that they did this right after, S2 Games went and spent all this money to promote Strife at the, at PAX. And I've heard from some official sources through S2 Games that a large portion of the people who organized that event and put on that event were then cut, because as part of the marketing team. So it's just, to me, it irks me. And this is just part of, the business is there's always this turnover, especially when games launch and what have you. But admitting to mismanagement and then sort of just blindsidedly cutting these people post PAX, I don't know, just doesn't seem to be like the nicest thing to do or the best of timing, Jason. It rubbed me the wrong way. That's why I had to give it an A-bomb.
That was never a good time.
It was never a good time. All right, so what's your A-bomb or D-bomb, man?
All right, it's been so long, I'm going to give one of each.
Okay.
Because it's been so long. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and give a D-bomb to John Smedley for his awesome rendition of Unchained Melody during karaoke at SOE Live.
Oh, man.
I was really surprised. Dude's got some pipes.
I can't believe, though, that you gave him a D-bomb, because if we all know, his plane was diverted.
Oh, God. I didn't
because bomb threat. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so moving
Too soon.
Think about that. All right. Moving on, give an A-bomb to ESPN, which you've probably heard in recent weeks. Their president has said that they don't want esports because they're not real sports. Which, all right, you can make that argument if you like. And, I'll admit I kind of go back and forth. I don't know how I feel about esports, S-sports, whatever. But they're definitely competitive. And I think you're speaking specifically in terms of, like, League of Legends. They're definitely a competitive thing that a lot of people like to watch. I don't know. I remember what the numbers are. Something like in the tens, 10, 15 million or something people, something like that. That'll watch League of Legends, watch the championships or whatever. And if you're a network that could draw in that many people, a lot of them in that wonderful 18 to 49 demographic, why aren't you jumping at that?
Let them call it whatever they want to call it.
No kidding. I mean, and not only that, but what was big on ESPN for several years? Poker. Poker was something you saw on ESPN like almost every night. So, what is that a sport? Does that belong on ESPN? I don't know. All I know is that if I ran a competing sports channel, like if I was Fox Sports or something like that, I think there actually is like a Fox Sports 1. It's like they tried to launch a sort of a competitor to ESPN. If I'm Fox Sports 1, I'm calling Riot up right now and saying, yes, you can be on our network. You can put us on the map and make us actually possibly take over ESPN. I mean, that's just a golden opportunity for someone out there. I personally don't think that esports are necessarily as mainstream as a lot of people think they are, but they are definitely growing. They are somewhat different, so they've let you to have a separate voice for your network or whatever, and they do definitely have millions of people. Why not take a chance on something like that? You're gonna have to take a little bit of risk if you want to unseat ESPN or something like that. So I would say go for it.
I definitely think esports has established itself as something that is going to be around, maybe even just as like a niche competition, but it's definitely going to be something that a portion of the society will watch. Because our generation, the generation that is mostly involved with esports, either by playing them themselves or by watching them as a spectator or just playing the game also, have some sort of vested interest in the scene, if you will. And I don't think that's going to go away really as we get older. So I can only see esports establishing itself and sort of plateauing at the current rate or even growing larger, essentially. Because over time, as more nerds play games, less people are going to play football, which means football maybe gets less attention and esports gets more attention. I mean, if you talk to your great-grandfather, Jason, I'm sure he wasn't like, oh, yeah, we played soccer and, football, and they had thousands of people coming to the stadiums. Like, early 1900s, late 1800s, there's different games being played all the time. Those things always change. You got to look towards the future.
Well, the big thing in that time period that you're talking about was boxing. That was the sport in America.
Oh, right.
Where's boxing now?
It's still a sport, but it's more like it's evolved. It's like MMA and all that kind of stuff. But it's nowhere near the sort of, I think, broadcast in terms of population sizes that it was back then, for sure. So in terms of the member highlights, there are D-bombs and A-bombs. We have got one here from Breckner, who says, I have an A-bomb for all the MMOs that have well-known installation problems, like Terra or Warframe. There are plenty of people who missed out just because they couldn't even finish installing the game or connect to the servers. Those devs should really look into it.
I don't know if I've ever had installation problems with a game, but games that make it nigh impossible to sign up like on their website. Just, yeah. Square Enix is the absolute worst. Their Final Fantasy 14 account system is just the most. I thought Neverwinter, I thought Perfect World was bad. No, Square Enix is light years worse. They had their 14-day free trial of Final Fantasy 14 a little while ago, or 10-day or whatever it was, and I went to the site and I tried to sign up and I just couldn't. I don't remember what it was. I'd been in the beta and I had some other thing. I tried to. I think I sent in for my account, or I put in my account, said I'd forgotten my password. They said they sent me an email, and they did, and I reset my password, and it still wouldn't work. Something like that. I was just like, no, never mind. Screw you. So.
It kind of reminds me of the recent, I think it was Star Citizen. You could like sign up to have your account for Star Citizen and play it or whatever like that, the early beta, the early alpha. And you had to have 3 different names, like 3 different usernames and logins for the whole process.
Oh,
they
yeah,
all had
those,
to be independent.
Suck too. You got to have like your account name and your forum name and your in-game name and
yeah, and they're all separate, and they can't be the same or use the same information. Like they have to be completely different. Stuff like that definitely annoys me. But Breckner, I would definitely say contact them because, I mean, I would have no clue as to why you're having these installation issues, but I would assume that there's something pesky going on in your computer, as usually happens with situations like this. Jason, why don't you go ahead and take the next highlight here?
This one is from UDK, all spelled out. He says, the bomb would have to be for Tryon Worlds for doing some good marketplace testing for ArcheAge. I've really looked at the marketplace yet in ArcheAge. I've heard some people say it's a little, not pay to win, but it has like paywalls. Or you just can't. I think you just can't.
We can't do the labor system. The labor system is like really restrictive.
That's what I'm hearing.
Like
although there's something good about the labor system. I haven't dug into it myself, so I'll maybe write about it later. But there's a reason why the labor system might be the way it is. But
yeah, I think the labor system makes sense from a perspective of it keeps people from flooding the market and what have you. But I think it made it to where for free to play players it was too restrictive of a labor system. Like people who are not pay to play, but I guess they are pay to play. The subscribers, if you will, end up getting more labor points, and it feels like how the system should be. versus how it is as a free-to-play player. That's the general vibes I've been getting so far.
Okay. I haven't checked it out myself, but I will.
The open beta starts, not the open beta, but release starts in about a week.
Yeah, like a week.
Yeah, about a week or so. And then we'll get in and really see what people have to say about that. I don't, honestly, Jason, I can't really say so much about how it will be for free-to-play players at launch, because when I played it during my first look, they gave me a founders pack to get into the alpha.
Oh yeah, so
and that automatically gave the sort of labor boost. So I wouldn't be able to say how it is for someone who was that system. Founders, it worked fine, but who knows when it comes to the actual free to play. So we'll have to revisit that and check it out.
Yep.
The final member highlight here is from Urso, who says a gigantic A-bomb to Tryon and their cheap imitation of Steam. Man, so much about Tryon here. Steam, Glyph is what it's called. I decided to go back to Rift today, and I found out that I couldn't use the direct launcher anymore. I had to use Glyph. So I thought, well, if I have to use a gaming platform, why would I use Glyph to play one game? Let me just install it through Steam. After installing it, I found out that even on Steam, I had to log in on Glyph, so now I need to go through Steam and Glyph to play a game. Kind of reminds me of like the whole Ubisoft like Uplay system or Games for Windows Live. All that stuff required you to log in despite being on Steam.
Yeah, that's always silly to me. If it's on Steam, or at least I've got some games that just require a quick little login, not in terms of like doing anything.
Not a whole other software system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that I could see as being stupid.
Did you hear that Warner Brothers maybe wants to make a competing Steam?
Everybody's making a competing.
Everybody makes a competing Steam.
I have Glyph, I have Arc, I have Uplay installed on my computer and Steam.
Yeah.
So that's just Battle.net,
And Battle.net, yeah. I mean, really, all you need is Steam and Battle.net, right? Right.
It makes sense to have these, to have a one-stop place for your games, and in the case of Arc, they're getting other companies' games on there as well. So that, again, that's sort of them competing with Steam or whatever. But to require it, even if you already have it on Steam, or already have it in the launcher, if you have the Rift on your computer or whatever, that's a little silly.
Just a bit.
Let me play how I want to play. If I want to play with your little launcher thing, and have that one-stop place for all your games, that's what I'll do. If I don't, then I won't.
Jason's spoken. The enchanting Jason has spoken.
Damn it! Now you're down to what, 92?
You're so enthusiastic, Jason.
Run out this month.
You're boundless, Jason. You're so brave and bright, and a calm and capable person. I'm so enamored to have you in my presence.
You're just going alphabetically, aren't you?
Maybe, Jason. Maybe. Jason, the question of the week last week was, or it wasn't last week. It was whenever this was last month. Who's your favorite MMO publisher and why? And we had some pretty good comments on here. We've got one from Mateo who said, my favorite MMO publisher is NCSoft because they have picked a lot of good games or lucked out to have them, of which my personal favorite is the Guild Wars series, and Lineage is also really great. So we got someone saying NCSoft there. He said
that's something you don't hear a whole lot, is people saying, "Hey, NCSoft." But anyway,
yeah, he actually makes a note of that. He says they have had a few mishaps though, and sadly they take forever some really good games to bring out. But the games they picked are good nonetheless. And if I can recall correctly, they haven't tried to get into the copy-paste browser game thingamajig yet, which to me is a really big bonus point.
Yeah.
I bet I could find a browser game NCSoft is. I'm sure they've collaborated on some kind of browser game, and then
I'm sure they probably have some, back in Korea, I would bet, but probably nothing we've ever heard of or had anything to do with.
Yeah.
Although, did you ever hear about the new Lineage?
Yeah, the one that was okay. I know there was supposed to be Lineage 3, and then Bluehole stole the code for Lineage 3 and created
that's
Terra.
right.
And now there's a new Lineage, which is kind of like an asymmetrical Lineage.
Yeah, that looks like it could be a browser game. I don't know.
It doesn't look bad. It looked okay, if I remember correctly, but I can't recall exactly, so it may be a little fuzzy. It may be worse than I can recall right now. I have no idea. Jason, can you take the next one here?
Sure. This is from the Zodiacs. It says, Square Enix, if enough people talk of a problem, it gets fixed. I never have to deal with anyone in my face about bonus stuff. Least favorite, no, that wasn't a question, but he's going to bring it anyway, is ZeniMax. They have been sneaky for the past, and while there's maybe lose hope in their product that has such high hopes for. Yeah, I mean, Square Enix's games are still pretty good if you can actually sign up to play them. But yeah, I mean, and
maybe they should talk about getting that problem fixed.
Yeah, he says, if there was a problem, it gets fixed. Well, their problem before was the original Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah, and it got fixed.
All of it. And yeah, they fixed it. Good job. ZeniMax, yeah, they just seem squirrely. They're I don't know. They seem like better PR than game.
I have yet to play Elder Scrolls. It's kind of like out of principle. I think I played literally 10 minutes of the beta, and then I was like, that's it.
I played it, and I even interviewed their lead developer about a month ago. And,
Floricum says, I believe Grinding Gear Games is, to me, one of the best publishers and dev teams for they made a great and truly free to play game. My secondary would be either, I don't know why my English is so terrible right now. My secondary would be either for Valve, made a game that has ran on for several years and still going great for a free to play, or SOE, for even though it had plenty of ups and downs, it is a good group who tries to do good with its community.
The reason your English is so difficult is because these are not written all that.
I'm like,
people use sentences. Come on.
Structure. I understand you can't speak English fluently. It's hard sometimes to read what you guys write. Seriously, it's hard. I tossed one at the very end, which was Booty. Jason, can you read what Booty wrote?
Booty. Valve is obviously the best publisher ever. Just look at Dota 2. Then it's probably Tryon and SOE, although SOE has some shady games, to be honest, like DCUO and Dragon something.
He can't even remember. He can't even give it the decency of remembering the name.
Oh, God, yeah. Dragon something.
He's like, I'm pretty sure they had some shady games, like DCUO and Dragon something. For that reason, they're 3. He's 3 on the list. But
So we have, 2 votes for Tryon and 1 vote against so far on this podcast?
Yeah. There's a lot of comments about Tryon.
Yeah,
Tryon's it's getting a lot of attention there. So for this question of the week, Jason, it is, how much do you actually pay attention to the lore in games that you play? Little or a lot? How much?
Depends. Depends on the game.
Depends on the game. I'd like to know from you guys. I'm assuming this is going to be from an MMO perspective, but if you guys play a lot of League of Legends or other sort of like session-based games, I'm curious to know how much you pay attention to the lore in those types of games as well. Let us know in the comments below, or send your responses in to michael@mmobomb.com, and I'll be sure to get you guys up here on the next podcast. That is assuming, of course, I can read what you're writing, because that's a big thing. I have to be able to read it, unfortunately. Reading is required. Jason, how do people who want to talk to you directly, or just want to admire your decisive and delightfully detailed demeanor, how do they go about doing so?
Oh, God. Well, they can follow me on Twitter. That's probably the best choice, @WinterInformal. I stream at twitch.tv/JasonWinter. I blog at jasonwinter.wordpress.com. And speaking of my blog, I've been doing a thing lately. I'd hoped to promote this a little earlier, like, a month ago when we were still hopefully going to do podcasts, but I'm doing a series called 50 MMOs in 50 Days, where I'm just giving like little capsule thoughts on every MMO I've ever played, basically. And I'm up to number, I think 34 is going up today.
Wow, 34.
So I'm about 2/3 of the way done. I believe yesterday was Neverwinter. Today was the Great Pandora Saga.
Oh, Jason, you're so steadfast and thoughtful and stimulating with your vivacious attention to the MMOs. Yes.
Can he use all of them in one podcast?
I pretty much skipped over all the E's up until
you're down to the
R's.
S's and the E's and whatever. Yeah.
There's quite a lot here. We can get to these next time, Jason. There'll be a lot more. I'll find some other types of words to describe you.
Oh, God.
Maybe not positive. we'll use that. We'll save those for later. Of course, for me, if you want to contact myself, Spunkify, you can send me an email, michael@mmobomb.com, or you can simply tweet me either at MMOBomb or at Spunkify. That's my personal tweetage, my personal Twitter. And I will do my best to answer your questions. As long as they are not, I don't know.
As long as they are worded in English.
Yeah, that's important. I was gonna say, don't ask me what my favorite game is because I'm supposed to be an impartial judge of games, so I can never let known what my favorite game is. I don't know.
I can, however, go read my blog.
You can go do that. I can't. I'm supposed to be impartial. I don't know. What? We should end this podcast. I think this is the part where it's supposed to like the tape's like rolling out. There's no more tape and. Is this the B-roll at this point? Like, are we still on? Is this thing still going?
Is this the blooper roll?
I think so. Hey guys, if you guys want to learn more about MMOBomb, check out the website. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next time. Spunkify out. Later, guys.